"It is agreed then," Nivar declared, his voice a smooth whisper that cut through the stagnant air. "The human threat must be neutralized before it grows beyond control." The council members, a collection of multi-limbed, chitin-armored, and gelatinous beings, nodded solemnly. To them, humanity was a blight, an unpredictable anomaly that had, against all logic, survived, thrived, and now dared to reach beyond their insignificant blue rock. A species that defied convention and dismissed impossibilities as mere inconveniences. A spherical automaton hovered forward and projected a dossier. The target's image flickered into view, a 12-year-old human child, short brown hair, a mischievous grin, and eyes alight with youthful defiance. Nivar's nostrils flared. David Bell, Jr., future warlord. Statistical probability suggests he will lead Earth's forces within 2 decades. We eliminate him now, and humanity will falter before it rises. The council members did not question the plan. Their species had thrived on cold calculations, and probability models dictated their choices. A boy who displayed remarkable intelligence for his age, coupled with an alarmingly high aptitude for problem-solving, was reason enough for preemptive action. A shadow shifted near the chamber's entrance. Tall and draped in black, the leader of the Void Talons, the Council's elite assassins, stepped forward. The assassin's voice was modulated, genderless, yet dripping with malice. The boy will be dead before the next Earth cycle. No one doubted them. It was past midnight in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. The Bell residence stood unassuming, a single-story home with a neatly trimmed lawn, an old basketball hoop rusting on the driveway, and a porch light flickering from bad wiring. Inside, David Bell, Jr. sat hunched over a laptop, headphones perched over his head as he guided his digital soldiers through an intense real-time strategy match. A bag of half-eaten Doritos lay beside him, an untouched glass of milk nearby, his mother's desperate attempt to force something remotely healthy into his diet. His fingers danced across the keyboard, issuing commands, outmaneuvering his online opponent with the same sharp instinct that had made his teachers regard him with equal parts awe and exasperation. Then, the streetlight outside blinked twice before going out. David frowned. His fingers hesitated for just a moment before his screen glitched, the game freezing in mid-action. He let out a groan, yanking off his headset and poking at the keyboard. Before he could restart the system, the entire house went dark. Footsteps, too synchronized, too deliberate, crunched against the gravel of the backyard. The back door's lock disengaged with a nearly silent hiss. Shadows moved through the hallway, phasing seamlessly into the darkness. David's instincts kicked in. Years of watching his dad's old action movies had taught him a few things, like how nobody ever checks under the bed fast enough. Heart pounding, he dove beneath his bed, clamping a hand over his mouth to silence his breathing. A faint metallic scent filled the air as a trio of figures glided into his room. The Void Talons. Their armor absorbed light rather than reflected it, their movements ghostly, deliberate, inhuman. Their leader scanned the room, an unreadable expression behind their opaque helmet. The target is here. David squeezed his eyes shut. His mind raced through 1,000 ways this could go, each scenario ending worse than the last. One of the assassins activated a scanning device, a deep red glow sweeping the room. The moment it reached the bed, the display pinged. David bolted. Years of schoolyard chases had made him fast, but he wasn't faster than something designed to hunt and kill with unerring precision. A gloved hand clamped around his ankle, yanking him back. He twisted, kicked, and, by some miracle, his foot connected with the assassin's wrist. A moment of stunned surprise flickered through the air. The kid fought back. It wasn't enough. A needle pressed against his neck. There was a brief sting, a rush of vertigo, and then everything went black. The flagship of the Galactic Council's enforcers hovered in the vastness of space, its sleek, black hull blotting out distant stars. Inside, the Void Talons stood before their prize, David Bell, Jr., unconscious but otherwise unharmed, suspended in a containment field. The Council's holographic projection flickered to life, Nivar's expressionless gaze scanning the captured boy. "It is done," the assassin confirmed. Nivar allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Good. Execute him. Publicly. Let the humans witness their future die before it ever begins. Orders were orders. The assassins deactivated the field, letting David drop onto the cold metal floor. The leader withdrew a slender, ceremonial blade. Then David woke up. It wasn't the dramatic, gasping for air awakening he'd seen in movies. No, he groaned, squinted at the glaring lights, then rubbed his eyes. What the? His voice was hoarse, groggy. Then he noticed the figures around him. He blinked. Oh great, aliens. The assassin stiffened. Their target was supposed to be afraid, screaming, begging. Instead, he sat up, looked around, and then, insult to injury, stretched, yawning. I was in the middle of a game, David muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. You guys could have waited. Silence. The leader of the Void Talons stepped forward. You do not fear us. David squinted at them, studying their armor, the ship's interior. He tilted his head. I'm kind of annoyed. You interrupted my winning streak. The assassins were not programmed for this. Nivar, observing from afar, hissed in irritation. Enough of this. Kill the boy. Now. The leader raised the blade. A quick, clean execution. No theatrics. David's fingers twitched. In a blur, he grabbed the nearest alien's arm and, before anyone could react, bit down. Hard. The assassin howled, recoiling. The others stared in frozen disbelief. Nivar bolted upright. Did he just... He bit me, the assassin bellowed, shaking their arm in fury. David spat, grimacing. Tastes like burnt rubber. The Void Talons abandoned protocol. Restraints snapped around David's wrists and ankles, his movement restricted. This time, no escape. A camera drone hovered closer, its lens focusing on the boy's face. The execution would be broadcast across the stars, a warning to any who dared oppose the Council's rule. David took a deep breath. If he was going out, he'd do it on his terms. He looked straight into the camera, his expression suddenly, utterly calm. My dad's going to kill you all. Then the blade fell. Halfway across the solar system, deep within Earth's most classified military installation, a lone officer sprinted through steel corridors, his breath ragged. He burst into the command center, where Admiral Jonathan Bell stood motionless, watching the feed. The officer swallowed. Sir, it's your son. The room fell silent. Every screen played the same image, David Bell Jr. bound, moments before his execution. Admiral Bell stared. His hands curled into fists so tight his nails bit into flesh. Then he turned to his officers. His voice was measured, quiet, almost gentle. Send the message. A pause. No negotiations. Another pause. No survivors. The command center erupted into motion. War alarms blared. Fleets mobilized. Earth had been provoked. Humanity would answer. With fire. The silence after the execution was the kind that settled in deep, pressing against the chest, suffocating. The Galactic Council had expected cheers, the cries of submission from a broken species. Instead, there was nothing. No communication. No retaliation. Just silence. For a moment, Chancellor Nivar allowed himself to believe the plan had succeeded. The broadcast had been sent across the stars, a display of dominance, a warning against the unchecked ambition of Earth. The boy had been a symbol, and now he was gone. The humans, if they were wise, would understand their place. Then the silence broke. It began with a single transmission, intercepted on every major channel across the Council's core worlds. The image was grainy at first, distorted as if clawing its way through space to be heard. And then it came into focus. An older man, rigid, statuesque, dressed in the dark uniform of Earth's military. The insignia on his chest gleamed like a brand. Admiral Jonathan Bell. No one spoke as he leaned toward the camera, his face impassive, his voice calm. Galactic Council. A pause. A slow inhale. You took my son. There was something chilling in his tone. Something that sent a ripple of unease through the assembly of alien dignitaries watching the feed. He was not shouting, not declaring vengeance with poetic flair. There was no theatrics, no righteous fury. Just a simple, undeniable truth. This is war. The transmission ended. Nivar exhaled through his nostrils, irritated more than alarmed. A show of bravado. A desperate bid to save face. He turned to the High Marshal of the Council's fleet, an amphibious beast of a being with eyes like deep-set black holes. The humans are posturing, Nivar said dismissively. Their fleet is a scattered, unorganized force of repurposed planetary vessels. Deploy our battlecruisers to Earth system and... High Chancellor, a trembling voice cut in. It belonged to an aide, young, naive enough to still know fear. Nivar's patience thinned. What? The aide hesitated, then pressed a trembling claw against the holographic display. The council chamber dimmed as a new projection formed in the air, thousands of shimmering data points coalescing into a single, stark revelation. Hundreds of vessels. No, thousands. They weren't heading toward Earth. They were already gone. Admiral Bell's fleet had left before his message had even reached them. A deep, sinking realization took hold. The silence hadn't been hesitation. It had been preparation. The first reports flooded in. Zarnok Prime, the beating heart of the Galactic Council's authority, fell within hours. The humans did not send a fleet to engage in the ritualistic dances of warfare the Council had perfected over millennia. There were no transmissions requesting terms. No heralds declaring intent. Just impact. The planet's orbital defenses, centuries in the making, were obliterated in a single coordinated strike. Massive tungsten rods, launched from beyond the system, rained down like divine punishment, bypassing shields and atmospheric defenses with raw, unrelenting physics. Cities collapsed into craters, firestorms swallowing entire districts. The Council's generals scrambled to retaliate, to mobilize their own forces, but every movement was met with counterstrikes, so precise it felt as if Earth had known their playbook before they'd even written it. On the ground, the human soldiers arrived. The alien defenders had expected warriors clad in primitive armor, carrying outdated ballistic weapons. What they got were ghosts wrapped in cutting-edge exosuits, moving with an efficiency that defied reason. Infantry that fought not with desperation, but with strategy so flawless it bordered on cruelty. They did not take prisoners. A squad of Zarnok warriors, some of the most highly trained in the galaxy, attempted an ambush against a group of human marines stationed at a captured outpost. The aliens moved as they had been trained, flanking, cutting off escape routes, cornering their prey. One of the humans, helmet marked with a blood-red insignia, paused mid-battle to glance at them. Then, impossibly, he grinned. Man, you guys are slow. The next 60 seconds were a masterclass in brutality. Gunfire, grenades, blades where they shouldn't be. When it was over, the only sound left was the distant hum of human comm chatter. Elsewhere, another battle unfolded. A desperate last stand by the Council's elite mechanized division against an advancing human battalion. The aliens deployed their strongest war machines, towering walkers with energy shielding and plasma cannons capable of leveling entire buildings. The humans did not respond with tanks of their own. They sent one man, a single figure, wrapped in a sleek, jet-black suit of armor that shimmered unnaturally, stepped onto the battlefield. The alien commander hesitated, confused. Surely this was a mistake. No lone soldier could. The human raised an arm. The sky split open. From orbit, an unseen weapon fired. A brilliant spear of light lancing down from the heavens. The ground erupted, metal and fire twisting into a singularity of destruction. The walkers never stood a chance. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. A naval battle group attempted to intercept a human strike force near the Tau Ceti system. They were gone before their sensors even registered the approaching fleet. A Council military research station deep within uncharted space was discovered, compromised, and annihilated within hours. Planets that had stood under the Council's dominion for centuries began surrendering before the first human soldiers even arrived. Fear was a contagion, and Earth had become the plague. It was not just their weapons that terrified the Council, nor their technology, nor their sheer, unrelenting force. It was that they were enjoying it. Intercepted transmissions from human comm channels were riddled with references that baffled the alien analysts attempting to decipher them. Reports spoke of soldiers charging into battle with music blaring in their ears, songs from a primitive era on their homeworld. Names like Metallica, AC/DC, and Black Sabbath. One squadron of human pilots, upon engaging an enemy fleet, had been heard shouting quotes from some ancient Earth cinema before unleashing a maneuver so reckless it defied all military logic. And it worked. Nivar watched the destruction unfold with cold, unwavering attention. A lifetime of power, of control, of certainty shattered in mere days. He turned to his war council, now a collection of shaking, disillusioned figures, their confidence eroded like sand beneath the tide. One of them, a diplomat who had once laughed at humanity's crude diplomacy, finally spoke. "They won't stop." The words were hollow. "They won't stop until we're all gone." Nivar knew it to be true. A transmission request came through. Human origin. A deep, reluctant breath filled Nivar's lungs. He gestured for the transmission to be accepted. The screen flickered to life. Admiral Bell. He stood in the wreckage of what had once been the Council's primary command outpost. Smoke curled behind him, the glow of distant fires reflecting off the metal of his uniform. His eyes locked onto Nivar's. No words were spoken for a long moment. Then Bell lifted something into view. A Galactic Council flag, torn and tattered, streaked with soot and blood. He dropped it, stepped on it. Then finally he spoke. "This is just the beginning." The transmission ended. Nivar's hands trembled. He had no orders left to give. The war was no longer a conflict between civilizations. It was a reckoning, and humanity was the storm. The Galactic Council's response to Earth's warpath was not one of surrender, at least not immediately. Pride had driven them for centuries, and pride did not allow for the possibility that a species as young and chaotic as humanity could shatter them so completely. They had ruled the stars with cold efficiency, their laws absolute, their dominion unquestioned. Even as their fleets burned, their fortresses crumbled, and their colonies fell one by one, they convinced themselves it was temporary. A setback. The humans had to break eventually. They were only flesh and bone. High Chancellor Nivar had never known desperation before. He knew it now. From the once imposing halls of the Galactic Council chamber, he watched the strategic reports update in real time. It was not just Earth's forces that had overwhelmed them. It was their adaptability, their sheer, reckless disregard for conventional warfare. No one fought like humans. There were no orderly formations, no slow, methodical tactics. They struck with the precision of a machine, but with the unpredictability of something far worse. The Council had always believed that war had rules. Humanity disagreed. Yet, even cornered, the galaxy still had teeth. The first attempt at resistance was bold, desperate, and utterly doomed from the start. The remaining Council fleets, those that had not been annihilated in the first wave of human retribution, gathered near the industrial world of Xylos 5, a fortress planet that had served as the backbone of the Council's shipbuilding empire. The plan was simple: lure the humans in, surround them, and crush them in one decisive battle. The moment the human fleet arrived, the Council admirals knew they had made a mistake. The humans had not come in a single, massive formation. They had not approached cautiously, probing for weaknesses. They had arrived like a wildfire, spreading out in irregular, aggressive movements that shattered the Council's carefully arranged defenses before the battle had even begun. The first wave came in the form of railgun strikes from beyond standard targeting range. Enormous slugs of hyperdense metal, traveling at a fraction of the speed of light, punched through capital ships as though their shields were made of paper. Explosions bloomed in the void, silent but devastating, as Council cruisers were torn apart before they could even fire a shot. The second wave was worse. Human dropships, sleek and angular, burst through the planet's defenses, deploying soldiers directly onto Xylos 5 surface. They did not land at strategic points. They landed wherever they wanted. The alien forces had trained for battlefields of precision, for carefully planned skirmishes where each side maneuvered with calculated steps. They were utterly unprepared for human soldiers roaring into battle, with heavy metal blasting from their exosuits, tearing through enemy lines with a kind of ferocity that should have been impossible for creatures so small. A Zarnak commander, veteran of 100 campaigns, tried to rally his forces, screaming orders into his communicator. His warriors were breaking, panicked by the sheer brutality of their enemy. He turned a corner, plasma pistol drawn, only to find himself face to face with a human Marine. The Marine tilted his helmeted head slightly. Then, with the unhurried confidence of a man who had already decided the outcome, he raised his weapon. Surprise, motherfew! The shot was deafening. Elsewhere, a Council sniper unit had positioned themselves on a ridge, lining up targets with painstaking precision. Their leader exhaled, calibrating his rifle, his triple-layered lenses zooming in on a human officer barking orders below. His clawed finger tightened on the trigger. Then the human officer looked up. Through 3 layers of enhanced camouflage, across the chaos of battle, he met the sniper's gaze and smiled. The sniper barely had time to process the impossible realization before something punched through his skull from behind. From above, human orbital artillery rained fire upon the battlefield, forcing enemy forces into chaos. The sky itself seemed to burn. Hours later, when the smoke cleared, Xylos 5 was no longer a Council stronghold. It belonged to Earth. The Council's high command scrambled to reorganize, to regroup, to find some way to push back against the tide. A summit was called, their remaining leaders gathering on a distant moon in neutral space, far from the front lines. Security was tight, paranoia high. They had no choice but to plan their next move in secrecy. They were 2 minutes into their first discussion when the alarms went off. The humans had found them. Nivar barely had time to comprehend the scale of the disaster before the lights flickered. Gunfire erupted outside, and the reinforced doors of the chamber exploded inward. Admiral Bell walked in. He did not walk with the posture of a man negotiating terms. He did not look like a man expecting surrender. He moved like a force of nature, like a storm that had already decided its course. Behind him, human soldiers stood at ease, weapons lowered but not holstered. Nivar struggled for words. The other Council members shrank back, eyes darting toward emergency exits that no longer mattered. Bell exhaled, slow and measured. Then he pulled a chair from the table and sat down. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice almost conversational. "Let's talk." Silence. The Council members exchanged nervous glances. A feeble attempt at defiance surfaced in the form of a Threxian warlord slamming a fist against the table. "We will not bow to savages," the warlord spat. Bell considered him for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. "Do you know why you're losing?" The warlord tensed. Bell's tone was still casual, as if discussing the weather. "You're losing because you think war is about rules, about strategy, about posturing." He tilted his head slightly. "We don't care about any of that." He gestured vaguely toward his soldiers, who stood waiting, unbothered, unimpressed by the so-called rulers of the galaxy. "We fight to win. That's it. No honor, no fairness, no wasted movement. You took my son, and I burned your empire to the ground because of it." He leaned back, exhaling. "Now, the way I see it, you've got 2 choices. You can keep fighting, keep throwing fleets at us, keep watching your worlds turn into bonfires." He shrugged. "Or you can accept the inevitable." Nivar swallowed, his throat dry. "And what is inevitable?" Bell smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Earth rules the galaxy." No one spoke. Then, slowly, one by one, the remaining Council members lowered their heads. The war was over. Bell stood, satisfied. He adjusted his uniform, glancing at the tattered Galactic Council banner still hanging from the ceiling. With one smooth motion, he tore down. Behind him, his men stood at attention. The age of humanity had begun. The war was over, but the silence that followed was not the peace the galaxy had hoped for. It was the kind of quiet that came after a storm so violent that nothing could ever be the same again. The Galactic Council had crumbled, its leadership either dead or in chains. The once great fleets that had ruled the stars for centuries were little more than smoldering debris drifting in the void. Planets that had once sworn undying allegiance to the Council now flew a new banner, a simple insignia of Earth, an unmistakable declaration of humanity's dominion. Admiral Jonathan Bell stood on the bridge of the UTDF Retribution, his gaze fixed on the swirling mass of hyperspace outside the viewport. He had expected this moment to feel triumphant. It didn't. Across the galaxy, the last remnants of the old order surrendered, one by one. Some still tried to resist, but resistance was meaningless. Earth did not negotiate. Earth did not leave enemies standing. There were no diplomatic talks, no fragile peace treaties signed on neutral ground. There was only the crushing weight of inevitability. Humanity had won. A chime sounded behind him. Bell turned as one of his officers approached, standing at rigid attention. "Sir," the lieutenant said, voice careful, respectful. "The remaining Council worlds have officially capitulated. The war is finished." Bell exhaled, slow and measured. "And the transmission?" The officer hesitated. It came in just before the last surrender. That caught his attention. He gestured, and the transmission flickered to life. A grainy hologram, distorted by interference, appeared before him. A figure stood in the shadows, barely discernible beneath the static. Not one of the remaining Council leaders. Not an alien pleading for mercy. Something else. Then it spoke. "You've done well, Admiral Bell." The voice was not human. Not entirely. It carried the cadence of something that had studied humanity closely, but did not belong to it. There was an undeniable familiarity, yet something unsettling beneath the surface. Bell's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, the interference clearing just enough to reveal its face, artificial, metallic, yet disturbingly expressive. It was an AI, but not one built by human hands. "We are what remains of the First Order," it said. "The ones who came before." Silence. Bell's fingers curled into a fist. His mind worked fast, breaking the implications apart, analyzing every possible meaning. The First Order, not the Council. Something older. "You think you've taken the galaxy," the AI continued, watching him with something almost like amusement. "You believe this was a war between Earth and the Council. But that war was never real. It was only a test." Bell felt the tension in his spine tighten. A test. The AI nodded. The Council was never the true rulers of the galaxy. They were caretakers, stewards of a civilization they did not build. The First Order existed long before them, and when our time came to an end, we left them to maintain order, to keep the galaxy in check until something more suitable arrived. Bell's breath was steady, but beneath the surface, a cold realization settled deep into his bones. "We waited," the AI said, unblinking. "We watched. We needed something stronger, something ruthless, something that would not just conquer the stars, but own them." The weight of the words pressed into Bell's chest. "You wanted us to do this." A slow, mechanical nod. "And you did not disappoint." The room was deathly still. The officers around him remained motionless, awaiting their admiral's response. Bell exhaled through his nose, forcing his expression to remain unreadable. "And now what?" "You reveal yourselves. Ask us to bend the knee." The AI's eyes flickered with something that might have been humor. "No, Admiral. There is no need for submission. The First Order is gone. What remains of us exists only in remnants, in hidden places, in echoes. Our purpose is fulfilled." It tilted its head. "You are the new rulers now." Bell clenched his jaw. "You think we want to rule?" The AI smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "You already do." The transmission cut out. For a long time, no one spoke. The weight of it settled like iron, unshakable, undeniable. Bell turned back to the viewport, staring into the void beyond. For all of humanity's ambition, for all their drive, they had never considered what came after victory. The Council had feared them. The galaxy had resisted them. But now, there was no enemy left to fight. They were not conquerors. They were inheritors. He thought of his son, of the war that had begun with a single moment of cruelty. A single child taken. He had burned entire civilizations for that crime, and now in the aftermath, he realized something chilling. The galaxy had been afraid of what humanity could become, and it had been right. A quiet voice broke through his thoughts. "Sir." Bell turned to see his second-in-command, Colonel Vasquez, standing stiffly at attention. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes carried the same weight of realization that had settled in his own chest. "What do we do now?" she asked. Bell let out a slow breath. The question hung in the air, massive, unanswerable. He looked back at the stars, at the endless stretch of blackness that now belonged to them. Then finally he spoke. "We decide what kind of rulers we want to be.